Arthur lived in a small house filled with the quiet sounds of ticking clocks and the rustling of newspapers. Each day was much like the last. He'd wake with the sun, make a pot of strong coffee, and read the local news. Afternoons were spent tending his small garden, a splash of color in his otherwise muted world. Evenings were for television and a simple supper. He was a creature of habit, a habit born of loneliness after his wife, Martha, passed away 5 years ago. He missed Martha dearly. Their life together had been full of laughter and shared dreams. Now, the house felt empty, echoing with memories. He tried to fill the void with routine, but a persistent ache remained, a yearning for connection. He often looked at old photographs of Martha, smiling at their younger selves, remembering happy times. He'd tell her stories, imagining she was still there, listening patiently. But the silence always returned, a heavy blanket smothering his spirit. He was a kind man, Arthur. His neighbors liked him. He was always ready with a helping hand or a friendly wave. But beneath the pleasant exterior lay a deep sadness, a sense of incompleteness. He felt like a ship without a sail, drifting aimlessly on a vast ocean. His wistful nature was evident in the way he looked at young couples walking hand in hand, or the way he paused to watch children playing in the park. He longed for that simple joy, that carefree spirit. But those days were gone, lost in the mists of time. Sometimes, he would sit on his porch swing, watching the world go by. He'd see families laughing, friends chatting, and he'd feel a pang of envy. He wished he had someone to share his life with, someone to talk to, someone to laugh with. His routine was a shield, a way to protect himself from the pain of loss. But it was also a prison, keeping him isolated and alone. He knew he needed to break free, to find something new to fill his days. But he didn't know where to start. He felt like an old tree, its roots firmly planted in the past, unable to reach for the future. Little did he know, the past was about to reach out and grab him. The attic was a forgotten place, a repository for memories and forgotten treasures. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight that pierced through cracks in the boarded-up windows. It smelled of old wood, dried flowers, and something indefinably ancient. Arthur rarely ventured up there. The steep, narrow stairs were a challenge, and the memories it held were often bittersweet. But today, he needed a specific box, the one containing Martha's old photo albums. He wanted to look at her pictures again, to relive some of those happy moments. He pulled the string to turn on the bare bulb hanging from the rafters. The weak light illuminated the cluttered space. Boxes were stacked haphazardly, covered in layers of dust. Old furniture draped in sheets stood like ghostly figures. Arthur coughed, waving away the dust as he began his search. He rummaged through several boxes filled with old clothes, forgotten toys, and yellowed newspapers. Finally, he spotted the box he was looking for, tucked away in a corner. As he reached for it, his hand brushed against another, smaller box. It was made of dark wood, with a simple brass clasp. Curiosity piqued, he lifted it down. It felt surprisingly light. He brushed off the thick layer of dust, revealing the dark wood grain. It wasn't Martha's. He didn't recognize it at all. He hesitated for a moment, unsure if he should open it. It felt like intruding on someone else's privacy, even though he was alone in the attic. He carefully unclasped the brass latch. The lid creaked open, revealing a stack of letters tied together with a faded ribbon. The paper was yellowed and brittle, the ink faded. He gently lifted the stack from the box. The handwriting was undeniably his. A younger, more flamboyant version of his current script, but his nonetheless. He recognized the looping A's and the distinctive slant. He carefully untied the ribbon, his heart beginning to pound in his chest. He unfolded the top letter. The paper crackled in his hands. The words swam before his eyes. It began, "My dearest Eliza." A wave of memories washed over him, a flood of emotions he thought he had long forgotten. Eliza. Her name echoed in his mind, a whisper from the past. He hadn't thought of her in decades. Who was she? Why had he written these letters? And why were they unsent? He sank down onto an old trunk, the letters trembling in his hands, ready to uncover a past he thought was buried. The silence of the attic was broken only by the frantic beating of his heart. The first letter was dated July 12, 1958. Arthur remembered the year vaguely. He'd been a young man, full of dreams and ambition, working at the local newspaper as a reporter. He read the words, his voice trembling slightly as he spoke them aloud. My dearest Eliza, the days feel like years when I'm not with you. I long for the sound of your laughter, the sparkle in your eyes. Remember our picnic by the river? The way the sunlight danced on the water, just like it danced in your hair. I could have stayed there forever, just you and me, lost in our own little world. He unfolded the next letter, dated a week later. The tone was more urgent. Eliza, I need to see you. I can't explain it in a letter, but something has changed. Meet me at the usual place, by the old oak tree, tomorrow at sunset. Please, Eliza. It's important. Arthur frowned. What could have been so important? He had no recollection of this Eliza, or the usual place they frequented. He continued reading, each letter revealing a deeper and more passionate love. He wrote of stolen kisses under starry skies, whispered promises, and shared dreams of a future together. Eliza, my darling, I can't imagine my life without you. You are the sun, the moon, and the stars to me. Marry me, Eliza. Be my wife, my partner, my everything. Let's build a life together, filled with love and laughter. I await your answer with bated breath. The letters grew increasingly desperate. Eliza hadn't replied. Arthur wrote of his confusion, his hurt, his fear that he had done something wrong. Eliza, I don't understand. Why haven't you answered my letters? Why haven't you come to see me? Have I offended you in some way? Please, just tell me what's wrong. I can't bear this silence any longer. The last letter was the most heartbreaking. Dated months later, it was short and filled with resignation. Eliza, I guess this is goodbye. I've tried everything I can to reach you, but it seems my efforts are in vain. I will never forget you, Eliza. You will always hold a special place in my heart. I wish you all the happiness in the world, even if it's not with me. Forever yours, Arthur. Arthur sat there, stunned. The letters painted a vivid picture of a love he had completely forgotten. A love that had consumed him, filled him with joy, and then left him heartbroken. He felt a pang of sadness for the young man he had been, and for the lost love he had never known. But why had these letters never been sent? What had happened to Eliza? And why couldn't he remember any of it? He knew he had to find out. He had to know what had become of his Eliza. This wasn't just about the letters anymore, it was about reclaiming a part of himself he thought was lost forever. The attic air hung heavy with unanswered questions. Arthur carefully placed the letters back in the box, his mind racing. He needed to find Eliza. He owed it to his younger self, and perhaps to her as well, to finally deliver these words of love and longing. It felt like a mission, a purpose that had been missing from his life for so long. He started his search the next morning. The first place he looked was the local library. The librarian, a young woman with bright eyes and a helpful smile, offered her assistance. Arthur explained his situation, feeling a little foolish admitting he was searching for a woman he hadn't thought about in decades. I'm looking for any information about a woman named Eliza, he said, his voice a little shaky. She would have been living in this town in the late 1950s. The librarian typed the name into her computer. Eliza is a fairly common name, she said. Do you have a last name? Arthur hesitated. No, he admitted. I don't remember her last name. It's been so long. The librarian smiled understandingly. Well, let's start with the city directories from that time period. They might list residents by name and address. They spent hours poring over old, heavy books. Arthur scanned the pages, his eyes straining to read the small print. He found several Elizas, but none that seemed to fit the picture he had in his mind. Discouraged but not defeated, Arthur decided to try old phone books. He remembered his parents having a collection of them in the basement. Maybe he had inherited them when they passed. He returned home and ventured down into the dimly lit basement. The air was damp and musty, but he eventually found a stack of old phone books tucked away in a corner. He hauled them upstairs, his back aching from the effort. He flipped through the yellowed pages, his fingers tracing the names. Again, he found several Elizas, but none that he recognized. He began to feel a sense of hopelessness creeping in. Maybe this was a fool's errand. Maybe Eliza was long gone, or had changed her name. But then, on the very last page of the last phone book, he saw it, Eliza Miller. 14, Oak Street. His heart skipped a beat. 14, Oak Street. He remembered that address. It was a small house on the edge of town, near the river where he and Eliza had shared their picnic. He quickly looked up the address in the current phone book. There was no listing for Eliza Miller. He then searched online, hoping to find some information. He found an obituary for a woman named Eliza Miller who had passed away a few years ago. He clicked on the link, his hands trembling. The obituary mentioned a surviving daughter, Sarah. A glimmer of hope flickered within him. Maybe, even if Eliza was gone, her daughter would want to receive the letters. He decided to write to Sarah, explaining his situation and asking if he could deliver the letters in person. He carefully crafted his words, hoping to convey his sincerity and respect. He sealed the letter, addressed it to Sarah, and walked to the mailbox, his heart filled with a mix of hope and trepidation. He had taken the first step. Now, all he could do was wait. Days turned into weeks, and Arthur found himself constantly checking the mailbox, his hope slowly dwindling with each passing day. He started to doubt his decision to contact Sarah. Maybe he was intruding on her grief, stirring up a past that was best left forgotten. He replayed the letters in his mind, wondering if they were too personal, too revealing. He tried to distract himself with his usual routines, but his heart wasn't in it. The garden seemed less vibrant, the television shows less entertaining. Even his conversations with Martha's photograph felt strained. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had let Eliza down, not just in the past, but now, by failing to deliver his letters. Then, one afternoon, as he was about to give up hope, a letter arrived. It was addressed to him in a neat, elegant script. His hands trembled as he opened it. "Dear Arthur," the letter began. "My name is Sarah Miller, and I received your letter regarding my mother, Eliza. I was very intrigued by your story and the mention of the letters you wrote to her so long ago. I must admit, I know very little about my mother's life before she met my father. She rarely spoke of her past. I would be honored if you would consider sharing these letters with me. It would mean a great deal to learn more about her. I understand this is a delicate matter, and I want to assure you that I will treat your story with the utmost respect. If you are willing, I would be happy to meet with you in person. Please let me know if this is something you would be comfortable with. Sincerely, Sarah Miller." Arthur reread the letter several times, a wave of relief washing over him. Sarah was willing to meet him. She was curious about her mother's past. This was an opportunity to finally fulfill his mission, to deliver the letters and perhaps, in some small way, bring closure to a story that had been left unfinished for so long. He immediately sat down and wrote a reply to Sarah, expressing his gratitude and agreeing to meet with her. He suggested a date and time, and included his phone number. He sealed the letter, his heart filled with anticipation. As he walked to the mailbox, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The weight on his shoulders seemed to have lifted. He was no longer just an old man living a lonely life. He was on a mission, a journey back into his past, and perhaps, a journey into a new future. He had no idea what to expect, but he was ready to face whatever lay ahead. He was ready to meet Sarah, and to finally share the letters that had remained unsent for so long. The past, it seemed, was not quite finished with him yet. It was calling him back, offering him a second chance, a chance to connect, to remember, and perhaps, to heal. Arthur spent the days leading up to his meeting with Sarah carefully preparing. He reread the letters countless times, wanting to be sure he remembered every detail, every nuance of his relationship with Eliza. He also tried to piece together his memories of that time, but they remained frustratingly fragmented. He could recall snippets of conversations, fleeting images of Eliza's face, but nothing concrete. It was as if a part of his brain had been erased, leaving a blank space where those memories should have been. He also wrestled with the question of why the letters had never been sent. Had Eliza rejected him? Had something happened to her? Had he simply lost his nerve? The possibilities swirled in his mind, adding to his anxiety. He chose his outfit carefully for the meeting. He wanted to look presentable, respectful, but not overly formal. He settled on a clean button-down shirt, a pair of comfortable slacks, and his favorite cardigan. He also made sure to bring the box of letters, carefully wrapped in a soft cloth to protect them. As the day of the meeting approached, Arthur became increasingly nervous. He worried about what Sarah would think of him. Would she judge him for his past relationship with her mother? Would she be angry that he had intruded on their lives after all these years? He also worried about his own emotions. Would seeing Sarah, Eliza's daughter, bring back a flood of painful memories? Would he be able to control his emotions? On the morning of the meeting, Arthur woke up early, his stomach churning with nerves. He tried to eat breakfast, but he could only manage a few bites of toast. He spent the morning pacing around his house, checking the clock every few minutes. Finally, it was time to leave. He grabbed the box of letters, took a deep breath, and headed out the door. As he drove to Sarah's house, he couldn't help but feel a sense of unreality. It was as if he were living in a dream that had begun with a dusty box in the attic and was now leading him to a meeting with the daughter of a woman he had loved and lost so long ago. He pulled into Sarah's driveway, parked the car, and sat there for a moment, gathering his courage. He took another deep breath, opened the car door, and stepped out, ready to face whatever the past, and the future, might hold. He walked towards the front door, his heart pounding in his chest, and rang the bell. The sound echoed through the quiet neighborhood, signaling the start of a new chapter in his life, a chapter that was about to be filled with unexpected revelations and profound connections. The door opened, and a woman stood before him. She had kind eyes and a warm smile, and there was something familiar about her face, a certain grace that reminded him of someone, though he couldn't quite place who. "Arthur?" she asked, her voice gentle. "Yes, I'm Arthur," he replied, extending his hand. "I'm Sarah," she said, shaking his hand warmly. "Please, come in." He stepped inside, and Sarah led him into a cozy living room filled with sunlight and the scent of fresh flowers. Bookshelves lined the walls, and comfortable armchairs were arranged around a coffee table. It was a welcoming space, filled with a sense of warmth and tranquility. "Thank you for coming," Sarah said, gesturing for him to sit down. "I'm so curious to hear your story about my mother." Arthur sat down carefully, placing the box of letters on the floor beside him. He took a deep breath and began to tell Sarah about finding the letters in the attic, about the passionate words he had written to Eliza, and about his desire to finally deliver them. As he spoke, Sarah listened intently, her eyes fixed on his face. She asked questions about his relationship with Eliza, about their shared memories, and about why the letters had never been sent. Arthur answered her questions as honestly as he could, admitting that his memories were hazy and fragmented. He told her about his search for Eliza, about finding her obituary, and about his hesitation in contacting her daughter. "I wasn't sure if I should intrude on your life," he said, his voice filled with remorse. "I didn't want to cause you any pain." Sarah smiled understandingly. "I appreciate your concern, Arthur," she said. "But I'm glad you reached out to me. I always wondered about my mother's life before she met my father." She never talked about it much. This is a chance for me to learn more about her, to connect with a part of her past that I never knew. Arthur felt a sense of relief wash over him. Sarah wasn't angry or resentful. She was genuinely interested in hearing his story. He reached down and picked up the box of letters, placing it on the coffee table. "These are for you," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "They're the letters I wrote to your mother so many years ago. I hope they bring you some comfort, some understanding of who she was." Sarah reached out and took the box, her fingers gently tracing the faded ribbon that held the letters together. She looked at Arthur, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Arthur," she said. "This means more to me than you can imagine." As Sarah began to open the box, Arthur couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. He had finally delivered the letters, fulfilling his mission. But he also knew that this was just the beginning of a new journey, a journey into the past, and perhaps, a journey into a new future, a future filled with unexpected connections and profound revelations. The letters were a bridge, connecting him to Eliza, to Sarah, and to a part of himself that he had thought was lost forever. And as Sarah began to read, he knew that the secrets of the past were about to be revealed, secrets that would change everything. Sarah carefully unfolded the first letter, her eyes scanning the faded ink. Arthur watched her, his heart pounding in his chest. He wondered what she was thinking, what she was feeling as she read his words. "My dearest Eliza," Sarah read aloud, her voice soft and gentle. "The days feel like years when I'm not with you." As Sarah continued to read, Arthur closed his eyes, allowing the words to transport him back to that time, to that place, to that love. He could almost feel the warmth of Eliza's hand in his, the sound of her laughter echoing in his ears. Sarah finished the first letter and moved on to the next, and then the next. With each letter, the story of Arthur and Eliza's love unfolded, a story filled with passion, longing, and heartbreak. After a while, Sarah paused, looking up at Arthur, her eyes filled with tears. "These are beautiful, Arthur," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "My mother must have been a very special woman." "She was," Arthur replied, his own eyes misting over. "She was the most wonderful woman I had ever met." Sarah smiled sadly. "I wish I had known her then," she said. "I wish she had told me about you." Arthur shrugged. "I don't know why she didn't," he said. "Maybe it was too painful for her to talk about. Maybe she just wanted to protect you." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe," she said. "But I still wish I had known." They sat in silence for a few moments, both lost in their own thoughts. Then, Sarah picked up another letter and began to read aloud. "Eliza, my darling, I can't imagine my life without you. You are the sun, the moon, and the stars to me. Marry me, Eliza." As Sarah read those words, Arthur suddenly remembered something. A flash of memory, vivid and clear, swept over him. He remembered proposing to Eliza, under the old oak tree by the river. He remembered the look in her eyes, the tears of joy streaming down her face. He remembered her saying yes. "She said yes," Arthur blurted out, his voice filled with excitement. "Eliza said yes. She agreed to marry me." Sarah stopped reading, her eyes widening in surprise. "She did?" she asked. "But then what happened? Why didn't you get married?" Arthur frowned, his brow furrowed in confusion. "I don't know," he said. "I don't remember. It's like a part of my memory is missing." Sarah looked at him thoughtfully. "Maybe these letters can help you remember," she said. "Maybe they can unlock the secrets of the past." She picked up another letter and began to read, hoping that the words would trigger another memory, another clue to the mystery of what had happened between Arthur and Eliza. The room fell silent once more, filled only with the sound of Sarah's voice and the faint rustling of the yellowed pages. The past was calling, and they were both listening intently, hoping to finally understand the secrets it held. The air crackled with anticipation, with the promise of revelations that would change their lives forever. They continued reading the letters, each one offering a glimpse into the past, a piece of the puzzle that was their lost love. Arthur's memories remained fragmented, like shards of glass scattered on the floor. He could see glimpses of Eliza's face, hear echoes of her voice, but the full picture remained elusive. As Sarah read, she occasionally stopped to ask questions, trying to fill in the gaps in the story. She asked about their favorite places, their shared dreams, and the people who had been a part of their lives. Arthur did his best to answer, but he often found himself struggling to recall the details. It was as if a fog had settled over his mind, obscuring the memories of his youth. "I wish I could remember more," he said, his voice filled with frustration. "I feel like I'm letting you down, like I'm not giving you the full story." Sarah smiled reassuringly. "Don't worry, Arthur," she said. "You're giving me everything you can. And these letters are helping me to understand my mother in a way I never thought possible." They reached the last letter, the one in which Arthur had said goodbye to Eliza, resigned to the fact that their love was over. Sarah read the words aloud, her voice filled with sadness. "I guess this is goodbye," she read. "I will never forget you, Eliza." When she finished, she looked at Arthur, her eyes filled with compassion. "What happened, Arthur?" she asked. "Why did you give up? Why didn't you fight for her?" Arthur shook his head, his eyes filled with tears. "I don't know," he said. "I just don't remember. It's like something happened, something terrible, and it wiped my memory clean." Sarah reached out and took his hand, squeezing it gently. "We'll find out, Arthur," she said. "We'll figure out what happened. We'll uncover the truth, no matter how painful it may be." She stood up and walked over to a bookshelf, scanning the titles. "My mother had a lot of old photo albums," she said. "Maybe there's something in there that can help us remember." She pulled down several albums and brought them back to the coffee table. They spent the next hour poring over the photographs, searching for clues, for anything that could jog Arthur's memory. There were pictures of Eliza as a young woman, radiant and beautiful, her eyes sparkling with life. There were pictures of her with her friends and family, pictures of her at parties and picnics, pictures of her by the river, under the old oak tree. Arthur recognized some of the faces in the photographs, but he couldn't place them. He felt a strange sense of familiarity, but the memories remained just out of reach. Then, Sarah pointed to a photograph of Eliza standing next to a man Arthur didn't recognize. The man had his arm around Eliza, and they were both smiling. "Who is this?" Sarah asked. "Do you know him?" Arthur looked at the photograph, his brow furrowed in concentration. He shook his head. "No," he said. "I've never seen him before in my life." Sarah studied the photograph closely, her eyes narrowed in thought. "This is strange," she said. "This picture was taken shortly before my mother met my father. I always assumed she was single at the time." Arthur felt a shiver run down his spine. Something about the photograph felt wrong, unsettling. He couldn't explain it, but he knew that it held a key to the mystery, a clue to the truth about what had happened between him and Eliza. He had a feeling that what they were about to uncover would change everything. The past was about to reveal its secrets, and the consequences would be profound. "Do you recognize the location?" Sarah asked, pointing to the background of the photograph. "It looks familiar, but I can't quite place it." Arthur studied the picture more closely. The background was blurry, but he could make out a few details, a winding path, a row of trees, and a glimpse of a river in the distance. Suddenly, his heart skipped a beat. "I think I do," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I think that's the path by the river, the one that leads to the old oak tree." Sarah's eyes widened. "The same oak tree you mentioned in the letters?" she asked. Arthur nodded. "Yes," he said. "That's where I proposed to Eliza." Sarah stared at the photograph, her mind racing. "But who is this man?" she asked again. "Why would my mother be with him at our special place, so close to when she met my father?" Arthur shook his head, his memories still hazy. "I don't know," he said. "But I have a feeling this photograph is important. I think it holds the answer to why our love ended." Suddenly, Sarah had an idea. "Wait a minute," she said. "I have another photo album, one that my mother kept hidden away in the attic. It's full of pictures from her younger years, pictures she never showed anyone. Maybe there's something in there that can help us." She hurried out of the room and returned a few minutes later with a dusty, leather-bound album. She opened it carefully, revealing a collection of black and white photographs. They began to flip through the pages, their eyes scanning each image. There were pictures of Eliza as a child, pictures of her with her parents, and pictures of her with her friends. As they turned the pages, Arthur felt a growing sense of unease. He didn't recognize any of the people in the photographs. It was as if he had never been a part of Eliza's life. Then, they came to a page with a single photograph. It was a picture of Eliza, standing alone, her face etched with sadness. She was holding a baby in her arms. Arthur stared at the photograph, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't remember Eliza ever having a baby. "Who is this?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Sarah looked at the photograph, her eyes filled with confusion. "I don't know," she said. "I've never seen this picture before. My mother never told me she had a child." Arthur felt a wave of dizziness wash over him. He reached out and grabbed Sarah's hand for support. "This can't be real," he said, his voice trembling. "Eliza would have told me if she had a baby." Sarah shook her head, her eyes filled with disbelief. "I don't understand," she said. "Why would she keep this a secret?" They stared at the photograph in silence, their minds racing. Then, Arthur noticed something else in the picture. In the background, he could see a building that looked vaguely familiar. "Wait a minute," he said. "I think I recognize that building. It's the old church on Elm Street." Sarah's eyes widened. "The church where my mother volunteered for so many years?" she asked. Arthur nodded. "Yes," he said. "That's the one. But what does it mean?" Suddenly, Sarah had a realization. "Oh my God," she said, her voice filled with horror. "I think I know what this means." She stood up and walked over to a desk, opening a drawer. She pulled out a small, wooden box and brought it back to the coffee table. "My mother kept this box locked away," she said. "She told me never to open it. But I think it's time to break that promise." She opened the box, revealing a collection of documents and letters. She began to sift through them, her eyes scanning each page. Then, she stopped, her face turning pale. She looked up at Arthur, her eyes filled with tears. "I can't believe it," she said, her voice barely audible. "It's all here. The truth about my mother, the truth about you, the truth about everything." Arthur reached out and took her hand, squeezing it tightly. "What is it, Sarah?" he asked. "Tell me what you found." Sarah took a deep breath and began to speak, her voice trembling with emotion. "My mother had a child before she met my father," she said. "A child she gave up for adoption." Arthur stared at her in disbelief. "A child?" he asked. "But who was the father?" Sarah looked down at the documents in her hand, her eyes filled with tears. "It was you, Arthur," she said. "You were the father." Arthur felt the world spun around him. He stared at Sarah, his eyes filled with disbelief and confusion. I don't understand," he stammered. "How could I be a father and not know it?" Sarah shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know," she said. "But it's all here, in these documents. Letters from my mother to the adoption agency, records of your visits to her, even a copy of the birth certificate." Arthur reached out and took the documents, his hands trembling. He began to read them, his eyes scanning the faded ink. As he read, the memories began to flood back, a torrent of images and emotions washing over him. He remembered Eliza telling him she was pregnant. He remembered his initial joy, followed by fear and uncertainty. He remembered his parents' disapproval, their insistence that he was too young to be a father. He remembered the pressure he felt to do the right thing, to give Eliza up, to give the baby up for adoption. He remembered visiting Eliza at the church, trying to convince her that it was the best decision. He remembered her tears, her anger, her heartbreak. He remembered signing the adoption papers, feeling like he was signing away a part of himself. He remembered the last time he saw Eliza, the day she gave birth. He held the baby in his arms, a tiny, fragile creature with his eyes and Eliza's smile. He kissed the baby goodbye, promising to never forget. And then, the memories stopped. The fog descended again, erasing everything that had happened afterward. He didn't remember Eliza meeting Sarah's father. He didn't remember her getting married. He didn't remember anything. He looked up at Sarah, his eyes filled with pain and regret. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I had no idea. I would have done anything to be a part of your life." Sarah reached out and took his hand, her eyes filled with compassion. "It's not your fault, Arthur," she said. "You were just a kid. You did what you thought was best." They sat in silence for a few moments, both overwhelmed by the weight of the past. Then, Sarah spoke again, her voice soft and gentle. "There's one more thing," she said. "There's one more document in this box that you need to see." She reached into the box and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. She handed it to Arthur, her eyes filled with anticipation. Arthur unfolded the paper, his hands trembling. It was a letter, written in Eliza's handwriting. He began to read the words, his heart pounding in his chest. "My dearest Arthur. If you're reading this, it means that I'm gone. I wanted to tell you the truth about Sarah, but I was afraid. I was afraid that you would try to take her away from me, that you would disrupt her life. But I want you to know that I never stopped loving you. You were always in my heart. And I want you to know that Sarah is a wonderful woman. She's kind, she's compassionate, and she's everything I ever hoped she would be. I hope that someday, you'll have the chance to meet her. I know that you'll love her too. With all my love, Eliza." Arthur finished reading the letter, tears streaming down his face. He looked at Sarah, his heart overflowing with emotion. "She wanted us to meet," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "She wanted us to be a part of each other's lives." Sarah reached out and took his hand, squeezing it tightly. "I know," she said. "And now we are." They sat in silence for a few minutes, both overwhelmed by the weight of the past and the promise of the future. Then, Arthur spoke again, his voice filled with determination. "I want to be a part of your life, Sarah," he said. "I want to get to know you, to learn about your dreams, to share your joys and sorrows. I want to be the father you never had." Sarah smiled, her eyes filled with tears. "I would love that," she said. "I would love to have you in my life." They embraced, a father and daughter reunited after decades of separation. It was a moment of profound connection, a moment that erased the years of pain and regret. As they pulled apart, Sarah noticed something on Arthur's face. A look of confusion, of realization. "What is it?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. "What's wrong?" Arthur stared at her, his eyes wide with disbelief. "The photograph," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "The photograph of Eliza with the man I didn't recognize." Sarah frowned. "What about it?" she asked. "I know who it is," Arthur said, his voice trembling. "I know who the man is." Sarah stared at him in disbelief. "Who is it?" she asked. Arthur took a deep breath and spoke the words that would change everything. "It's me," he said. "The man in the photograph is me." Sarah's eyes widened in shock. "You?" she asked. "But how is that possible? You said you didn't recognize him. Arthur shook his head, his mind racing. I didn't, he said. I didn't recognize myself. But now I see it. The way he's standing, the way he's smiling, the way he's looking at Eliza. It's all coming back to me now. He closed his eyes, allowing the memories to flood back. He remembered posing for the photograph with Eliza, under the old oak tree by the river. He remembered the joy he felt, the certainty that they would be together forever. He opened his eyes, his face filled with a mixture of sadness and wonder. I can't believe it, he said. I can't believe I forgot. Sarah stared at him in disbelief, her mind struggling to process what she was hearing. But if that's you in the photograph, she said, then why didn't you remember it before? Why did you say you didn't recognize him? Arthur shrugged, his face filled with confusion. I don't know, he said. I guess my mind just blocked it out. Maybe it was too painful to remember. They sat in silence for a few moments, both overwhelmed by the implications of this new revelation. Then, Sarah spoke again, her voice soft and gentle. So, what does this mean? She asked. If that's you in the photograph, then what happened to you and my mother? Why did you break up? Arthur looked at her, his eyes filled with sadness. I don't know, he said. I still don't remember. But I promise you, Sarah, I'm going to find out. I'm going to do everything I can to uncover the truth about what happened between me and your mother. I owe it to you, and I owe it to her. He reached out and took her hand, squeezing it tightly. We're going to do this together, he said. We're going to find out the truth, no matter how painful it may be. And then, we're going to build a new life together, a life filled with love, laughter, and forgiveness. Sarah smiled, her eyes filled with hope. I would like that very much, she said. I would like that very much indeed. As they sat there, holding hands, they both knew that they were on the verge of something extraordinary. They were about to embark on a journey into the past, a journey that would uncover secrets, reveal truths, and ultimately, bring them closer together than they ever thought possible. The past was calling, and they were ready to answer. The future was uncertain, but they were ready to face it, together. The love that had been lost for so long was about to be found, and the world would never be the same again. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, revealing a picture that was both beautiful and heartbreaking. Arthur and Sarah sat in comfortable silence, each processing the enormity of their discovery. The weight of years lifted, replaced by a shared determination to understand and move forward. Sarah stood, a new energy animating her. There has to be more, she declared, a detective on the scent of a solution. More pictures, more letters, anything that can help us understand why my mother made the choices she did. She returned to the dusty photo album, turning pages with renewed purpose. Arthur watched, mesmerized by her strength and resilience. He felt a profound sense of guilt for the pain he had unknowingly caused, but also an overwhelming love for this woman, his daughter. Suddenly, Sarah stopped, her breath catching in her throat. She pointed to a picture, a candid shot of Eliza laughing, her arm around a young woman with bright eyes and a mischievous grin. This is my best friend, Emily, Sarah explained, a puzzled frown creasing her forehead. She's been like a sister to me my whole life. But what's strange is, she always told me she was adopted. Arthur's heart leaped. Could it be? Was it possible? He reached for the photograph, studying Emily's face. There was something familiar about her, a certain spark in her eyes that reminded him of Eliza. Do you have any pictures of Emily as a baby? He asked, his voice trembling with anticipation. Sarah nodded and raced to another room, returning moments later with a small, worn photo album. She flipped through the pages, stopping at a picture of a tiny infant with a shock of dark hair. Arthur gasped. He recognized the baby immediately. It was the same baby he had held in his arms so many years ago, the baby he had kissed goodbye, the baby he had promised to never forget. He looked at Sarah, his eyes filled with tears. It's her, he said, his voice choked with emotion. Emily is our daughter. Sarah stared at him in disbelief, her mind struggling to grasp the enormity of the revelation. Emily? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. But that's impossible. She's been my best friend my whole life. How could she be my sister? Arthur shook his head, his mind racing. I don't know, he said. But it's true. I can see it in her face. She has Eliza's eyes, and my smile. They sat in stunned silence, the weight of their discovery settling upon them. Then, Sarah spoke again, her voice filled with wonder. This is incredible, she said. It's like something out of a movie. My best friend is my sister, and you're my father. It's like our whole lives have been leading up to this moment. Arthur smiled, his heart overflowing with joy. It's a miracle, he said. A miracle that we found each other, a miracle that we're all together again. They knew that there was still much to learn, much to understand. But they also knew that they were not alone. They had each other, and they had Emily. And together, they would face whatever the future held, united by the bonds of love and family. The secrets of the past had been revealed, and the future was brighter than they ever thought possible. The unsent letters had led them to a treasure more valuable than gold, a family, reunited after decades of separation. A new chapter was beginning, and it was filled with hope, joy, and the promise of a love that would endure forever. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions. Sarah and Arthur decided to tell Emily the truth, a conversation filled with tears, laughter, and disbelief. Emily, initially shocked, quickly embraced her newfound family, her heart overflowing with love and gratitude. Arthur, once a lonely widower, found himself surrounded by family, his days filled with laughter, stories, and shared memories. He learned about Sarah's career as a teacher, her passion for helping children, and her love for animals. He learned about Emily's artistic talents, her dreams of becoming a famous painter, and her kind and generous heart. He shared his own stories with them, tales of his youth, his career as a reporter, and his life with Martha. He showed them pictures of Martha, sharing memories of their happy marriage and the love they had shared. They visited Eliza's grave together, a somber but peaceful moment. They placed flowers on her grave, sharing stories of her life and the love she had given them. Arthur spoke of the Eliza he had known, the young woman who had captured his heart and changed his life forever. Sarah and Emily spoke of the Eliza they had known, the loving mother and friend who had always been there for them. As Arthur's memories continued to surface, he began to understand why Eliza had made the choices she did. She had wanted to protect her children, to give them a better life than she could have provided on her own. She had carried the weight of her secrets with grace and dignity, never allowing her pain to overshadow her love for her daughters. Arthur also began to forgive himself for the mistakes he had made. He realized that he had been young and naive, manipulated by his parents and pressured by society. He had done what he thought was best at the time, but he had always carried the guilt and regret with him. Now, he had a chance to make amends, to be the father he had always wanted to be. He embraced his role with open arms, showering Sarah and Emily with love, support, and guidance. He helped Emily pursue her artistic dreams, encouraging her to enter her paintings in local art shows and helping her to secure a scholarship to a prestigious art school. He supported Sarah's passion for teaching, volunteering in her classroom and sharing his love of reading with her students. He moved out of his small, lonely house and into Sarah's spacious home, creating a warm and welcoming space for their growing family. He filled the house with laughter, stories, and the aroma of his home-cooked meals. He even started writing again, inspired by his newfound family and the incredible journey he had undertaken. He wrote about his love for Eliza, his regret for the past, and his hope for the future. He dedicated his book to Sarah and Emily, the daughters he had never known but had always loved. The unsent letters, once a symbol of lost love and regret, became a cherished bond between them. They reread the letters often, marveling at the power of words to connect people across time and space. They framed the letters, displaying them proudly in their home as a reminder of the miracle that had brought them together. Arthur's life, once filled with loneliness and regret, was now overflowing with love, joy, and purpose. He had found his family, his connection, his sense of belonging. He was no longer a ship without a sail, drifting aimlessly on a vast ocean. He was a ship with a full sail, navigating towards a bright and promising future, surrounded by the love of his daughters. And as he looked at Sarah and Emily, their faces beaming with happiness, he knew that Eliza was smiling down on them, her heart filled with peace and contentment. The unsent letters had led him to his own family, and in doing so, had changed everything. The end.